Hi, my name is Shinko. Welcome to my channel. We have been escaping from reality and the horrors of real life with the Warriors, Fire and Ice. This is the second book in the series. You can check out my previous videos. I already read the first. We are in the middle of chapter 6 and we are going to finish 6 and 7 today. Now, Fireheart and Greystripe found Windclan, and now Windclan with them is in the process of traveling back home. They need to stop for the night, so they just happened to come across Ravenpaw. So now we know our buddy Ravenpaw is good, happy, healthy. That's where we left off. Okay. Ravenpaw! Fireheart gasped as a sleek black cat emerged from the long grass. Fireheart raced over to his old friend and nuzzled him. "Thanks, StarClan, you're safe," he purred. He stepped back and studied Ravenpaw in surprise. What had happened to the skinny, scared black apprentice? This cat was plump, sleek, his fur, usually so dull before, now shed the rain like a holly leaf. "Firepaw!" Ravenpaw meowed in delight. "Fireheart!" Greystripe corrected him. He stepped forward and touched nose with the black cat. "We're warriors now! I'm Greystripe!" "Do you know this cat?" snarled Deadfoot. The hostility in his voice made Fireheart flinch. He looked at the bristling Windclan cats and silently cursed himself for calling Ravenpaw's name out loud. He just hoped Tallstar's warriors had been too distracted to hear it. If Windclan mentioned it at a gathering, it would spread through the clans like a forest fire. Ravenpaw was supposed to be dead. "Is he a loner?" asked one whisker. He could help us find food," Fireheart meowed quickly, glancing at Ravenpaw. The black cat nodded. "I know all the best places to hunt around here," he meowed. His fur didn't even bristle beneath so many hostile gazes. How much he has changed, Fireheart thought. "Why would a loner help us?" demanded Deadfoot. "Loners have helped us before," Greystripe told him. "Another loner once saved us from a rat attack near here." Ravenpaw stepped forward and bent his head respectfully as he addressed the Windclan warriors. "Let me help you. I owe my life to Fireheart and Greystripe, and if they're traveling with you, then you must be friends." He lifted his eyes and let his gaze rest on the Windclan cats. They returned his stare, more weary now than hostile. The rain was falling harder, and with their fur bedraggled, they looked skinnier than ever. "I'll go find Barley," Ravenpaw meowed. "He'll help." He turned and disappeared through the long grass. Tallstar's eyes burned with curiosity, but all he asked Fireheart was, "Can we trust him?" Fireheart met Tallstar's gaze completely. Tallstar nodded to his warriors. They let the fur lie flat on their shoulders and settled down to wait. Fireheart was almost wet through to his skin when Ravenpaw appeared again. This time, Barley was with him. Fireheart greeted the black and white loner with a friendly mew. It was good to see him again. Barley took one look at the dripping cats and meowed. "We need to find you some proper shelter. Follow me." Fireheart leaped forward at once, glad to move his stiffening legs. Greystripe was right behind him, but the Windclan cats hung back, fear and suspicion showing in their eyes. Tallstar blinked at his clan. "We have to trust him," he growled, before turning to follow the loner. One by one, the Windclan cats fell in step behind their leader. Barley and Ravenpaw led them through the hedge into another field. An overgrown corner among the brambles and nettles stood an abandoned two-leg nest. The walls were full of holes where stones had fallen out. Only half of the roof was left. The Windclan cat stared fearfully at it. "You won't get me in there," muttered one of the elders. Two legs never come here now, Barley reassured them. It'll give us some shelter from the rain, urged Fireheart. One of the apprentices whispered loudly, I'm not surprised he wants to hide in a two-leg nest. Once a kitty pet, always a kitty pet. Fireheart bristled. He hadn't heard that insult for several moons, but the story that a kitty pet had joined a clan must have made rich gossip at any gathering. Of course Windclan would know. He whipped around and glared at the apprentice. You've spent 2 moons living in a two-leg tunnel. Does that make you a rat? The Windclan apprentice drew himself up, roughing out his fur, but Graystripe stepped between them. Come on, we're just getting wetter the longer we stand here. Tallstar meowed. We've faced worse than a two-leg shelter these past moons. One night here will do us no harm. The Windclan cats murmured nervously among themselves, clearly reluctant. But with a glance at Fireheart, Morningflower picked up her kit and padded into the two-leg shelter. The Grey Queen followed after her, nudging her own kit forward out of the rain. The other cats gradually followed until every cat was inside. Fireheart looked around the gloomy shelter. The ground was bare, except for patches where weeds had burrowed their way under the stone walls. The wind and rain found their way through the gaps in the walls and roof, but it was drier and more sheltered than anywhere outside. He watched the Windclan cats sniffing cautiously around as they began to settle themselves away from the dripping holes and drafty cracks. He glanced at Graystripe, relieved. Only Tallstar and Deadfoot remained on their paws. What about food? Asked Deadfoot. Barley spoke. You should all be resting, he meowed. Raven! Fireheart interrupted him before Barley could finish saying Ravenpaw's name out loud. Why don't you two show me and Graystripe the best places to hunt around here? Deadfoot and Windwhisker will go with you, meowed Tallstar. Fireheart couldn't decide if the Windclan leader still didn't trust these two strangers, or if he was determined to show that his clan could look after itself. The 6 cats ventured back out into the rain. Hunting would be hard, but Fireheart was starving. Hunger always made him a better hunter. Tonight, the voles and mice wouldn't stand a chance. Just show me where they are, he meowed to Barley and Ravenpaw. The 2 cats led them into a small patch of woodland. Fireheart breathed in a lungful of the familiar scent. Then he dropped into a hunting crouch and began to stalk into the ferns. When the hunting party returned, each cat carried a mouthful of fresh kill. The Windclan cats shared a feast with their new allies that night. Every cat, from the eldest to the youngest, ate their fill, then curled up together to share tongues in mutual grooming, while outside the wind and rain lashed at the walls of the shelter. As darkness settled in, Barley got to his paws. I'm off. Rats to catch, he meowed. Fireheart stood and touched the loner's nose with his own. Thank you again, he purred. This is the 2nd time you've helped us. Thanks for sending Ravenpaw to me, replied Barley. He's turning into a fine rider, and it's good to share a meal with a fellow cat from time to time. Is he happy here? Asked Fireheart. Ask him yourself, meowed Barley, and with that he turned and disappeared into the night. Fireheart padded over to Tallstar, who was washing his paws. Fireheart couldn't help noticing how swollen and painful they looked. We'll take it in turns to keep watch tonight if you'd like, he offered, flicking his head towards Graystripe and Ravenpaw. Tallstar looked up at him gratefully, exhaustion clouding his eyes. Thank you, he meowed. Fireheart blinked respectfully at the Windclan leader and went to tell Ravenpaw and Graystripe. His offer to Tallstar had been genuine, but it also meant he could be alone with his 2 friends. He was desperate to get Ravenpaw out of earshot of the Windclan cats and ask him what he had been up to. Graystripe and Ravenpaw bounded over to his side as soon as he called them. Fireheart led them to the corner of the two-leg nest, close enough to the entrance for them to keep watch, but far enough away from the other cats that they could talk in private. So, what happened after we left you? He asked Ravenpaw as soon as the 3 friends had settled down. I headed straight across the Windclan territory, like you suggested. What about the two-legged dogs? Graystripe put in. Were they loose? Yes, but it was easy to avoid them, Ravenpaw told him. Fireheart was surprised by how casually his friend dismissed the dogs. Easy? He echoed. I could smell them from a long way off. I just waited until dawn, and once the dogs were tied up again, I tracked down Barley. He's been great. I think he likes having me around. Ravenpaw's expression suddenly clouded. Which is more than Tiger Claw ever did, he meowed bitterly. What did you tell him? Fireheart recognized the haunted look in Ravenpaw's eyes as he spoke about his old mentor. We said you'd been killed by a Shadow Clan patrol, he answered quietly. 2 Windclan apprentices were wandering towards them. Fireheart twitched his ears to warn his friends they had an audience. Oh yes, meowed Ravenpaw, raising his voice. We loners eat clan apprentices whenever we can catch one. The Windclan apprentices shot him a scornful look. You don't scare us, they mewed. Really? Purred Ravenpaw. Well, I guess your meat would be tough and stringy anyway. How come you're such good friends with a loner? One apprentice asked Fireheart. A wise warrior makes friends whenever he can, Fireheart replied. If it weren't for this loner, we'd still be cold and hungry instead of dry and well fed. He narrowed his eyes in warning, and the apprentices slunk away. So, ThunderClan thinks I'm dead, meowed Ravenpaw when they had gone. He gazed down at his paws. Well, it's probably for the best. He lifted his eyes and looked at Fireheart and Graystripe. I'm glad I've seen you again, he meowed warmly. Fireheart purred, and Graystripe prodded his friend affectionately with a hind paw. But you look tired, Ravenpaw continued. You should get some sleep. I'll keep watch tonight. I can rest tomorrow. He stood up and gently licked each of his old friends on the head. Then he padded to the entrance of the shelter, sat down, and stared out into the rain. Fireheart looked at Graystripe. Are you tired? Exhausted, admitted Graystripe. The Grey Warrior rested his head on his paws and closed his eyes. Fireheart took a final look at Ravenpaw sitting alone in the entrance. He knew now that he made the right decision in helping Ravenpaw to leave ThunderClan. Perhaps Bluestar had been right when she said Ravenpaw would be better off without the clan. Each cat has his own destiny, he thought. Ravenpaw was happy, and that was all that mattered. When Fireheart woke, Ravenpaw was gone. It was past dawn. The gray clouds had begun to drift away, tinged by the rosy glow of the rising sun. They looked like blossoms floating across a pond. Fireheart stared through a gap in the roof and watched them as the Windclan cats stirred and helped themselves to the leftovers of last night's catch. A short-tailed brown tom joined Fireheart and gazed up at the clouds with them. Fireheart jumped as a curious yell suddenly escaped the brown tom's throat. The noise brought the other Windclan cats crowding around them, murmuring and anxious. What is it, Barkface? Prompted Morningflower. Has StarClan spoken to you? Fireheart realized that this tom must be Windclan's medicine cat. He tensed instinctively at the sight of Barkface's bristling fur. The clouds are stained with blood, rasped Barkface. His eyes were wide and glazed. It is a sign from our ancestors. There is trouble ahead. This day shall bring an unnecessary death. Chapter 7. For a moment, none of the cats moved or spoke. Then Deadfoot growled. Any of the clans could see those clouds. We can't be sure that is a message for us. Hopeful mews spread through Windclan. Tallstar surveyed his clan, then meowed calmly. Whatever StarClan has planned for us, today we return to our home. I can smell more rain in the air. It is time we set off. Fireheart felt relieved at the leader's practical tone. The last thing they needed was hysteria at an ominous prophecy. Tallstar led the way out into the chilly morning air. Fireheart and Graystripe followed. The Windclan leader was right. The winds carried the promise of more rain, and soon. "Shall we scout ahead?" Fireheart offered. "Yes, please," replied Tallstar. "Let me know if you see dogs, two-legs, or rats. My clan is stronger this morning, but we had trouble with dogs on the way out. We must stay alert." Fireheart could see from the worried look in the leader's eyes that Barkface's warning had disturbed him more than his confident words suggested. His clan might be stronger, but it was in no state to fight off attackers. Fireheart raced away with Graystripe at his heels. They took turns going back to the clan, telling Tallstar what lay ahead was clear, or warning him to stay back while a two-leg passed by with a dog. The Windclan cats wordlessly obeyed their leader, plodding on heavy paws in spite of their night's rest. By sun-high, dark clouds had gathered once more, and the first drops of rain were beginning to fall. The ground began to slope upward, and when Fireheart pushed his way through a hedge, he recognized the red dirt track that led away from the two-leg territory and into Windclan's hunting grounds. His spirits soared, and he met Graystripe's gaze with a look of triumph. Nearly there! The muffled tramp of paw steps sounded behind the hedge. Fireheart spun around and darted back into the field. The Windclan cats had caught up with them. Deadfoot was at the head of the group. He looked startled by Fireheart's sudden appearance. "This way," Fireheart meowed, showing him the gap through the dripping leaves. He was eager to see Windclan's reaction when they glimpsed the uplands on the other side. With Deadfoot leading, the cats began to file slowly through. Fireheart followed close behind the last cat, but Deadfoot and two warriors had already leaped the ditch and crossed the track, and were pushing into the hedgerow on the other side. Their pace had quickened. They clearly knew where they were. Fireheart had to sprint to catch up. He followed them through the hedge and kept up with them as they bounded towards the long slope that led to the uplands and their home. At the foot of the slope, Deadfoot and his warriors paused to wait for the rest of the clan. They closed their eyes against the rain, but held their heads high. Fireheart could see their chests rising and falling as they breathed in the familiar scents sweeping from the uplands. Fireheart ran back to the rest of the clan, looking for Morningflower. He spotted her walking beside a tabby warrior who held her kit in his mouth. Every few steps, the tortoiseshell queen stretched her head to sniff the wet little bundle. It would not be long now before she could settle her kit into the Windclan nursery. Fireheart fell into step beside Graystripe at the rear. They glanced happily at each other but didn't speak, too caught up in Windclan's excitement at being home. Even the elders were moving swiftly now, keeping their bodies low and their eyes narrowed against the rain. As the clan joined Deadfoot at the foot of the slope, the deputy got to his paws and Tallstar took the lead. Without pausing, Tallstar began to follow a narrow sheep trail through the rough grass and heather. As the clan neared the top, some of the warriors raced ahead again. At the brow of the hill, they made proud silhouettes against the stormy sky, while the wind sent ripples through their fur. Ahead stretched their old hunting grounds. Suddenly, two apprentices charged past Fireheart and bounded away into the familiar heather. Tallstar stiffened. "Wait!" he yelled. "There might be hunting parties from the other clans here." As soon as they heard him, the apprentices skidded to a halt and pelted back to join the clan, their eyes still bright with exhilaration. From a rock-strewn ridge, Fireheart saw the dip in the ground that concealed Windclan's camp. With a purr of delight, Morningflower took her kit from the mouth of the tabby warrior and hurried towards the hollow. Tallstar flicked his tail, and three warriors raced forward to escort her as she disappeared over the edge and down into the camp. The Windclan leader paused while the rest of his clan rushed into the sheltering bushes below. He turned to Fireheart and Graystripe, his eyes shining. "My clan is grateful for your help," he meowed. "You have proved you are warriors worthy of Star Clan. Windclan has come home, and it's time for you to return to yours." Fireheart felt a pang of disappointment. He wanted to see Morningflower settled in the nursery with her kit, but Tallstar was right. There was no need for them to stay here any longer. Tall Star spoke again. There may be hostile hunting parties around. One Whisker and Deadfoot will escort you to Four Trees. Fireheart bowed his head. Thank you, Tall Star. Tall Star called to his warriors and gave them their orders. Then he turned his tired eyes once more to Fireheart. You have served Windclan well. Tell Blue Star that Windclan will not forget it was ThunderClan who brought them home. Deadfoot padded away in the direction of Four Trees. Fireheart and Graystripe walked after him, and with One Whisker at their side. They stayed close together as they followed a narrow path through a solid mass of gorse that provided good shelter against the rain. Suddenly, One Whisker stopped and sniffed the air. Rabbit! He called out joyfully before charging away into the gorse. Deadfoot stopped and waited. Fireheart could see a glint in the deputy's tired eyes. There was a rush of paw steps in the distance and the rustle of gorse, then silence. A moment later, One Whisker returned with a large rabbit dangling from his jaws. Graystripe leaned towards Fireheart. A little better than the RiverClan warriors, eh? Fireheart purred in agreement. One Whisker dropped the brush kill on the ground. Anyone hungry? They ate the rabbit gratefully. When he'd eaten his share, Fireheart sat up and licked his lips. He felt refreshed by the meal, but a weary coldness was beginning to nag at his bones, and his paws felt sore. If he and Graystripe followed the route they'd come, past Four Trees, they still have a long way to go. What if they took a shortcut through RiverClan's hunting grounds? After all, they were on a mission that had been agreed to, at the gathering at least, by all the clans. Could RiverClan really object if they passed through their territory? It wasn't as if they were going to steal prey. Fireheart looked around at his companions and meowed tentatively. It'd be quicker if we followed the river. Graystripe looked up from washing his paw. But that would mean crossing into RiverClan's territory. We could follow the gorge, Fireheart explained. RiverClan doesn't hunt there. It's too steep for them to get down to the river. Graystripe gently rested a damp paw on the ground. Even my claws ache, he murmured. I wouldn't mind taking a shorter route. He turned his yellow eyes hopefully to the Windclan deputy. Deadfoot looked thoughtful. Tall Star ordered us to travel with you to Four Trees, he meowed. If you don't want to come with us, we'll understand, Fireheart answered quickly. We'll only be in RiverClan territory for a blink. I can't see us meeting any trouble. Graystripe nodded, but Deadfoot shook his head. We can't let you go into RiverClan territory alone, he meowed. You're exhausted. If you did meet trouble, you're in no state to deal with it. We won't meet anyone, Fireheart had convinced himself and was determined to convince Deadfoot too. Deadfoot gazed at him with wise old eyes. If we did go that way, he mused, it would let RiverClan know that Windclan is back. Fireheart pricked his ears in understanding. And once they've smelled fresh Windclan scent, they might not be so keen to come rabbit hunting in your territory again. One Whisker licked the last traces of fresh kill from his lips and remarked, It'll mean we'll be home before moonrise. You just want to make sure you get a good nest in your den, Deadfoot retorted. His voice was stern, but there was a good-natured gleam in his eye. Then we're going through RiverClan territory? Fireheart asked. Yes, decided Deadfoot. He changed direction and led the cats along an old badger trail that took them away from the barren uplands. Soon, they were in RiverClan's territory. Even through their wind and rain, Fireheart could hear the roaring of the river as it crashed and thundered somewhere up ahead. The cats followed the trail towards the noise. The path shrank until it was little more than a narrow strip of grass on the very edge of a deep gorge. On one side, the land stretched upward, steep and rocky. On the other, it plunged straight down. Fireheart could see the far side of the gorge only a few fox lengths away. The space looked tantalizingly narrow, and Fireheart wondered if he could leap the gap. Perhaps if he weren't so tired and hungry. His paws pricked with fear at the thought of falling, but he couldn't resist peering over the side. Beneath his paws, the ground dropped away in a sheer cliff. Ferns clung to the tiny ledges, their leaves glistening, not from rain, but from the spray of the swollen torrent that foamed at the bottom of the gorge. Fireheart pulled back from the edge, the fur along his spine bristling in fear. Ahead of him, Deadfoot, One Whisker, and Graystripe plodded steadily on, heads down. They would have to follow this path until they could cut away from it, through the small strip of forest that stood between them and Thunderclan territory. Fireheart stumbled as he hurried to catch up. Deadfoot's ears were pricked and his tail flattened so that it almost dragged along the ground. One Whisker was clearly nervous, too. He kept looking sharply up the slope beside him as if he could hear something. Fireheart could hear nothing but the roaring of the river. He glanced anxiously over his shoulder, his eyes darting from side to side. The Windclan cat's wariness was making him uneasy. The steep slope began to flatten out until they could move further away from the cliff edge. The rain was still driving into their faces, and the darkening sky told Fireheart that the sun was setting, but it would not be long now before they reached the forest. There would be more shelter there. The thought of food and a dry nest cheered Fireheart. Suddenly, a warning yowl rumbled in Deadfoot's throat. Fireheart stiffened and tasted the air. A RiverClan patrol! A screech sounded from behind them, and the cat spun around to see 6 RiverClan warriors charging towards them. Fireheart's fur stood on end with horror. The deep gorge with its raging waters was still dangerously close. A dark brown RiverClan landed on top of them. Fireheart rolled away from the gorge, kicking furiously with his back legs. He felt teeth bite into his shoulders and struggled under the weight of the hissing warrior. He scrabbled desperately on the sodden ground, trying to free himself. The RiverClan warrior raked his sides with sharp claws. Fireheart twisted and bit into the fur of his attacker. He clamped his jaws tight and heard the warrior yell, but the other cat's claws only raked him more fiercely. "This will be the last time you set foot in RiverClan territory!" hissed the brown Tom. Around him, Fireheart was aware of his companions struggling fiercely. He knew they were as exhausted as he was from the long trek. He could hear Graystripe yowling violently. One Whisker hissed with pain and rage. Then from the forest behind them, another sound reached Fireheart's ears. It was full of fury, yet it filled Fireheart with hope. Tiger Claw's war cry! Fireheart smelled the fast-approaching battle scent of a Thunderclan patrol. Tiger Claw, Willowpet, White Storm, and Sandpaw. Yowling and spitting, the Thunderclan cats leaped into the fray. The brown Tom released Fireheart, and he quickly struggled to his paws. He watched as Tiger Claw pinned the gray tabby Tom to the ground, giving a warning bite to the Tom's hind leg. The Tom ran, screeching away into the bushes. Tiger Claw whipped around and fixed his pale eyes on Leopard Fur. The mottled RiverClan deputy was wrestling with Deadfoot. The lame warrior was no match for the furious RiverClan she-cat. Fireheart prepared to leap to the rescue, but Tiger Claw was ahead of him. The dark warrior dived forward and grasped Leopard Fur's wide shoulders with a mighty yell. He hauled her off the scrawny Windclan deputy. Fireheart heard a vicious squeal behind him. He spun around to see Sandpaw locked in battle with another RiverClan she-cat. Twisting and tussling, the pair rolled over and over on the wet grass, spitting and clawing each other fiercely. Fireheart gasped. They were rolling towards the rocky edge of the gorge. One more roll and they would be over the side. Fireheart sprang. With a mighty swipe, he bundled the RiverClan warrior off Sandpaw and away from the edge. Sandpaw skidded away, closer to the drop. Fireheart lunged forward and grabbed her by the scruff of her neck with his teeth. She squealed with rage as he dragged her away from the gorge, her paws scrabbling on the muddy ground. She sprang to her paws, and as soon as he stopped and hissed at Fireheart, her eyes burning with fury. "I can win my own battles without your help!" Fireheart opened his mouth to explain, but a terrible yowl made them both turn their heads. Graystripe was leaning imperiously over the edge of the gorge, his hind legs straining beside him. Fireheart glimpsed a white paw clutching at the edge. Graystripe leaned down with his mouth open, trying to get a grip on the paw, but it disappeared out of sight in the terrifying rush. Graystripe cried out after it, his wail echoing along the gorge. All the cats stopped fighting at the sound of Graystripe's agonized call. Fireheart froze, panting with shock and exhaustion. The RiverClan cats scrambled to the edge of the gorge. Slowly, Fireheart followed them and looked over the side. Far below, through the deafening spray, he saw the dark head of a Windclan warrior sink beneath the foaming water. With a cold feeling of horror, Fireheart recalled the words of the Windclan medicine cat. This day shall bring an unnecessary death. That's it. We're on chapter 8. So, a lot happened. Had a big fight. So I do want to ask you this. Was Fireheart and Greystripe, were they in the right to go through Windclan's hunting grounds to get home? Yes, it was a mission agreed on by all the clans. But what's also agreed on by the clans is that 4 Trees is safe. All the clans could go to 4 Trees, and from 4 Trees, all of the properties you can get to. So while it would have taken longer, much longer, it would have guaranteed safety. But again, it was a mission all the clans agreed on. Do you think Fireheart and Greystripe were in the right? I guess it doesn't matter if they were in the right or not. Someone died. And yes, Windclan cats can swim, but during a storm, things become a lot more complicated. Well, I'll end it there. And I did get my answer on how long it'll take to actually upload these videos. It takes longer, but these videos are longer in nature, so yeah. Anyway, I really hope y'all are having a good day. Be safe out there in this crazy mixed up universe of ours. Bye.